Sisters, now we are changing the subject. We will be talking about Mother Founder's religious life. And what's more, we'll be talking about part of her religious life that is probably the most intimate, the most personal. We all know that Mother Founders was a person who had vision, who was very energetic, considering the state of her health, the number of trips and things she undertook, and people she met, and all sorts of things is just incredible. But at the same time, she was a person like each of us, has her own inner struggles, her weaknesses, her thoughts. And we'll be touching on that area. I'm able to speak about that because I was asked by previous Superior General, Sister Jana Zawieja, to work on her writings that are called Conversation with Jesus. There were a lot of pages. I had that thick files of, I think, 5 or something. So it took me 2 years that I spent in Rome. I was consulting other sources. I was consulting experts. I spent a lot of time in the archives trying to understand what's happening there. What's the context on all of this? And I must say, she gave me an exceptional chance to see her most inner life in those notes. And sometimes I felt like an intruder, because these notes were not written for anyone else. They were for herself. She wanted to remember certain things. She wanted to help herself in her spiritual life, to be a better person, to be more devoted to Jesus. And then she dies quite suddenly, although she was sick, and all of that remains. And we have an insight of her most intimate life. This book was published with those dialogue, those conversations with Jesus. But this is just a selection. It's not the full thing, because the full thing would be like, I think, like, I don't know, 4 books like this, at least. And nobody's going to read that. But there are things that repeat. So I was trying to make the selection showing different aspects, keeping, that would be representative of her. So that's why it took me a lot of time to really study, organize her notes, and of course I avoided those that I think were too intimate. In no way you could publish things like that, according to me, and that's. This way, this format was accepted by general administration at that point. Unfortunately, this book has not yet been translated into English. I don't know what's going to happen. It's up to the general administration. Probably it needs to be translated. No, that's it. That's an introduction. So we are going to touch this issue. I called this presentation Treasuring Earthware Vessels because knowing her, knowing the fruits of her life, now we are talking about her weaknesses, her struggles, her fragility. It just proves that she was the same way as each of us, that we have our virtues and vices, our problems and personal struggles, and we feel inadequate in many situations. And she was like that. And it doesn't stop God to make you holy, to make you saint. With all your problems, with the story of your life that you have, like we saw in the first part, a mother that didn't like her, all sorts of struggles, a father who was against her devotions and the most important things for her, etc., etc. I'll choose some of the quotations from that book for you to know, because some my Polish sisters can read that probably, but English speaking sisters cannot. So I translated it myself. So maybe it's not a perfect translation. It's just for the needs of this presentation, but I think it gives you some idea. And the first one is, I think, something that is a good spiritual portrait of her that we get from those conversations. She writes, "It seems to me that I'm always with you, that I carry you, possess you in my heart. Wherever I go with you. And when I leave my meditation, I do not end it as if I were to leave you, because it seems to me that I am with you in my works. And it is precisely your presence that gives me strength, the power, pure might, to overcome myself and every opposing force. But this, my Lord, is your action, and beside it, there is the constant voice of my corrupt nature, the return to vain self-love, to the point where I fear whether these feelings come from you, when I find vanity in them, pleasure in myself, and in them I seek myself." So this humility she has, this seeing herself as somebody who is vain, lacking love, and not loving God enough, not loving people enough, not worthy of God's love. And at the same time, someone who is so much gifted, who receives so much from God, and who is longing for His presence in her life, very much so. Luckily for us, Mother Foundress left a lot of written things, a lot of writings. They were not destroyed, which means that we have wonderful sources, but at the same time, it means that an enormous task to go through all of that, organize that, understand that. I just had a taste of it with one part, but still we have over 7,000 letters that are in the archives, and we know that are not all the letters she wrote. So we have autobiography that was published, Spiritual Journey was published. Now we're talking about Conversations with Jesus, but there are also, when I looked through, there are all sorts of things. There are, like, she had agendas with, there are mixed notes. She would write, what she bought in the shop, and then some important things among those everyday notes. And there are also pieces of paper, like pages from little notebooks that she would write, sometimes things of lesser importance and sometimes of very important. I was saying the other day about her laptop, notebook for travels. That's her laptop. Yeah, that she used on her journeys. Yeah. It's you can see it in Via Machiavelli in the museum. So what are the conversations with the Lord Jesus? When I think even the general administration, when they asked me to do this, They all thought this is, like Sister Faustina's journey. Oh, I don't know. That was also my thinking. I thought at the beginning, probably, I don't know if she had this revelation and she saw Jesus each time Jesus spoke to her. But, there are so-called, in spiritual light, it's so-called interlocutions, that there is this inner conversation with Jesus, some kind of inspirations. Apart from that, before going to Rome, I did some research on 19th century spiritual literature. And I knew that that was quite common, and maybe some of you were also asking, we should to write spiritual journey, like spiritual notes. So people did it, and sometimes they did it in the form of the dialogue. It doesn't mean that Jesus spoke to them exactly this word, but that was their kind of prayer, spiritual. So I was expecting something of the sort, and I started reading. My eyes were opening wider and wider. I lived in the general, there were her relics, so I would quarrel with her a lot. And sometimes I was really, it wasn't an easy task. Sometimes I went to the chapel and Sister gave me a place on the side of where the relics are. And there's a big statue in the general of her looking at me, and I said, in the chapel, you could leave me alone. Because but it's a wonderful adventure, and it helped me a lot, to understand her and to understand that she was really weak person struggling a lot in her inner life. So what is it? Okay. There are notes written between these 2 years, 1886, 1902. So this is the time when Father Lechert was her confessor. There are nearly 30 manuscript notebooks and single pages of them. So there's a lot. You see okay. There are spiritual notes made after confessions and spiritual direction on Father Anthony Lechert. They concern matters of conscience. Why I said it's so intimate, so personal. Because it seems that after the confession, in order not to forget some of the important things Father said to her, she would write. She would write what she said, and she would use this form of a dialogue. She strongly believed, I'm going to talk about it later, she strongly believed that her confessor represented Jesus for her. So she would, she would interpret the confessor's words as Jesus' words. And, it's sometimes funny because there are like explanation about things that are, that I mean, some theological things, spiritual things, some things concerning life that Jesus would, I don't know, even today we look differently at those things. So probably Jesus had a better knowledge than this. But still, there are parts like that. But mainly, they concern her spiritual life. And it turns out that we have a beautiful person with this great desire, cannot incredible desire of God in her life, of loving God, of experiencing God love, of being close to God, and of doing His will in her life, in every bit of it. And then we have her struggles, her insecurity, fragility, hesitancy, scrupulence, certainly. There were days, for example, with Father Lechert would be in Rome. She would confess in our convent, sisters and her, and return home. And in the afternoon, she would send a note to him. Apparently, the post functioned very well. So in the afternoon, she would send a note, "Oh, Father, could you come because I need a confession?" But she confessed in the morning. And so there were days that she would confess every day, and she felt guilty all the time. And Father, and you can see through the process that Father taught her. And she would say, I cannot go to the Holy Communion. I said, no, go, pray and go. He taught her, how to leave aside her, this over sensitivity to her, because she wanted so much to please Jesus, and she saw all these little things as an obstacle. Okay. In this picture, you can see some of those notes. Okay. I didn't use the original notes. I just looked through them because they were before. There were sisters who worked very hard to decipher Mother Foundress's writing. So I got already the computer stuff, and I got the scans of these pages, which was very useful because sometimes sisters couldn't decipher what was there, and somehow I managed to get back and to see, and I managed sometimes to decipher what they couldn't, because Mother Foundress's writing is not easy. They did a great job. As you can see, Mother Foundress used those kind of notebooks, different sizes, different thickness. And, she would write mainly in Polish, although there are parts in French. And I think these parts in French are when she made a retreat in French. And sometimes she would reintroduce different languages, like a sentence or a passage. And these languages are usually Latin, Italian, or English. I told you that she was writing about her weaknesses, her struggles, like you do in confession and spiritual direction, okay? Because there are not only her weaknesses, her what she considered sins, but also her struggles. She was like trying to find the ways how to act in life, how to handle certain situation in order to please God. So that's the part of what it says soul. She would write soul, okay, which means her, not what she says. And then she would say Jesus, and then she would write what Father Lehert said. But of course, you have to remember that she wrote it later. So probably when she wrote the exact words of Father Lehert, she would probably change them a little bit, and would probably stick to those things that were more important to her, how she interpreted them. We don't know this exactly. There are certain parts when she was in the United States, and she spent the whole year there in 1887, and Father Lehert was not with her. So the only way for her to contact her spiritual direction was through letters. And then you have the letters that Father Lehert sent her back in response to the questions she posed, she sent before. And you can see that in those notes, those letters are rewritten. Okay, Father Lehert said, for example, be punctual. And in the notes, you have the same sentence, I, Jesus, tell you to be punctual. Okay, so she would change that, and it shows how much she believed that God acts through that person in her life. And it's probably true, because he helped her a lot. So that's the only case when we can say that these are the exact words, just the person is changed. And sometimes when I was working on that, sometimes she forgot to change. Okay, so we have Jesus says I, and then at one point this Jesus obeyed to Jesus or something. Okay, she forgot to change, but basically that's what it is. And what kind of problems she had? Some quotations. My Lord Jesus, forgive me that sometimes, feeling tired, I envy those who have some rest, and I would like to have some as well. But I know, my Lord, that this is a temptation, and I apologize for you for my lack of love. Okay. How true about each of us, no? And another one. My sweet Lord, grant by your grace that all that you teach me may be fulfilled in me. And now, my Lord, I still accuse myself before you of unkindness to my sisters, of impatience toward them, of lack of gentleness and forbearance. Forgive me, Lord, this misery of mine. So this is her relationship with sisters. Another example. Oh my Lord, what shall I do when temptations of sorrow, yearning, discouragement come upon me? You, my Lord, do not tell me to scourge myself, because I immediately fall into great tribulation. So teach me how to act. So it seems that sometimes she was down, right? Another one. Oh Lord, how should I worship and praise you? For you are inexhaustible in your mercy. Yet how I fear that the sweet inner words which I sometimes hear my soul, through your mercy, are not a satanic delusions, especially when I hear that you, my King, are in my soul. Although, my Lord, I do not feel your presence, and could any other force than the power of your grace draw me to love you and to deny myself? Okay. This is about her spiritual life. Okay, this is more like a spiritual direction. And another one, O most merciful Lord, I feel such fear within me, such anguish at the thought that I am to reprimand my sisters, that I am to speak to them. I feel that this, my Lord, is what you require of me, that is my duty, your holy will, and the sinful nature of mine flees from it. The thought comes to me that I do not have the strength for it. Lord, instruct me and show me what to do. So she was, as I said before in one of the presentations, some of you were present, that she thought that this responsibility for others, this love, means being very kind, very patient, very understanding, but at the same time a reprimand when the situation needs it. The person, that's what she did towards sisters. But it doesn't mean that it was easy for her to tell somebody that you're doing wrong, you should change your behavior in some situations. And last one, most merciful Lord, I often worry and trouble myself about many things, about spiritual and material matters, and I do not sufficiently trust and rest in you. As a result of this preoccupation, I am impatient with my sisters. Forgive me, O Lord and my God. Again, our situation. We are preoccupied with so many things and have no patience to one another. Mother Francis knew it. My Lord, you allowed that still various temptations assail me. For hearing, O Lord, that Holy Father had given material aid to a certain congregation which he loves, temptation came to me, and so I said to you, Oh my Lord, do you really want this work? From nowhere help, material difficulties and troubles, persons you do not send, meaning vocations. And so, my Lord, can you want this congregation? And then she continues, immediately made me feel guilt before you. You made me feel guilt before you, my King. I said all this out of my anger. Oh Lord, who am I that you should care for me? Oh Lord, by your grace, I'm thy servant. Your servant, your sweetest love bounds me. I desire nothing but you and the fulfillment of your will, my Lord and King. Now, who was Father Antoni Lechert? She was 1 year younger than her. and she was the confessor, spiritual director, for many years. It's 83 is too early, I think. Okay. And she was also director of the congregation on behalf of the church. So his role was tremendous. For today's world, for today's reality of the church, it would not be possible that one person could do all of that, what he did, because he had all sorts of, I would say, influence or power over the congregation. But Mother Foundress trusted him a lot. He called him not only his spiritual director, but she called him not only her own spiritual director and confessor. She called him the father of this work, of this congregation. He was well educated, I wanted to add. He had two doctorates, PhD, in theology and canon law. So that's why he was probably helping Mother Foundress with legal issues like constitutions, etc. Born in Wielkopolska, western part of Poland. He first became a diocesan priest, then worked in Paris. I'm going to go back to that issue later. And in Paris, he met Father Semenenko, one of the co-founders of Resurrection Fathers congregation, who was also a confessor of Mother Foundress for some time. So that's why they met, Mother Foundress and him met in Rome when he moved to Rome, because eventually he decided to join the Resurrection Fathers. And you know the story later, that he wanted to found his own congregation based on kind of shared charism, like our community, but he didn't succeed. There was a lot of trouble, etc. And in fact, he left this congregation. So at the end of his life, he was not a Resurrection Father, but a priest, just a priest. And how she understood it, again, the quotation from these conversations with Jesus. Today, in the light of your holy grace, you made me realize that to walk in your ways, I must above all listen very carefully, humbly, and meekly to the holy words of my Father. I should ask him about everything and submit all to his judgment, both regarding my soul and the matters of the congregation and my sisters. Which means, and it's many places that she considers, she made a kind of a vow to obey his confessor, because she treated him as his superior. Because she said, I don't have a superior because I'm a superior. Okay, I need a superior. So why don't the spiritual director be my superior? And since he was also the director of the congregation, so she would consult him on her internal matters as well as the matters concerning the congregation, the sisters, business, all sorts of things, new foundations. So my Father, such is my feeling and intention in writing to you, as if I were writing to the Lord Jesus. To him I give an account on everything I do. I already said about it. In my spiritual father, I have a father, a guide, a confessor. So by the vow of obedience, I so pledge myself to obey my father, not only as my guide, but as a superior given to me from you, my king. Personally, sisters, I believe that this is the help God gave her, because, in her family home, she got everything, she was a very well educated, perfect education, but she lacked emotional support. There was no emotional ties between the families, or they were not functioning the way they should. Today, we would say that this church needs more attention on the family part. She didn't get that, so she had this. She was a woman of great talents. She could. I just amazed what she could do, how she could do, and her discernment was so perfect. When those letters she wrote from the States when she was alone there to Father Lechert, showed that her discernment was so often better than his discernment. She was really wonderful, but at the same time she lacked self-confidence. She was insecure inside. She needed to rely on someone, and God gave her this father who was certainly a mature person. There was no, he didn't use her in any way. He was really supportive of her, understanding her ministry, and I think that's the way she God supported her. One of her confessors, I read that in the Positio, this big book that is prepared for the beatification, and I had access in the archives, that one of her later confessor, who became a Cardinal Barroso, Redemptorist, he said that two things about her that I remember struck me. That first, that she was so hungry on God that she could talk hours about God. That was towards the end of her life. And second, he said that she relied so much on her confessor that could be, in certain circumstances, dangerous. So, it just shows you how God collaborates with you. If you are, honest, and probably you have the stories like that you, from your life, that you do stupid things that could end badly, but God saved you, preserved you. And that's the Mother Foundress's story here. And this is the grave of Father Anthony Lechert in Chicago. When he was buried, towards the end of his life, our sisters took care of him. There was no contact with him when we weren't, as a congregation, we didn't stay in touch with him for a long period. Because there are certain issues after Mother Founder's death. He was forbidden to contact the congregation, etc. So he went to the United States with his brothers, the congregation he wanted to found, but as I said, it didn't succeed. So he was alone towards the end of his life. And when he got sick, our sisters in Chicago learned about it, took him to hospital where he died, and he's buried in our place in the cemetery. Am I right, sister from the States? Yeah. Okay. And now, what was different in 19th century? There are many things were different. There again, some old postcards and sisters with Mother Foundress in our garden in Via Machiavelli. Some are similar. Okay, the picture that is on the right, top right, it's the Campo di Fiori. It's the market when Mother Foundress went to buy flowers for the chapel. A little bit about spiritual masters that influenced 19th century spirituality and personally influenced Mother Foundress. You have the pictures. These are some of the people she trusted. Okay, and now I have a list. There is this famous quotations attributed to Mother Foundress, which I think wasn't hers, that says that Nazareth should be like a Carmelite in something, like Jesuits in obedience, Carmelites, because she was like that. Because she would, whenever she came across any spirituality that was, had something valuable and some treasure in there, she wanted to grab everything that was valuable. So she used different spiritualities, and I know how she coped, because when she was already a Nazareth sister, she wanted to always all her life she wanted to be a cloistered sister. So she would be happy doing her retreat with Benedictines in Cloisters Monastery. And then her confessor was redemptionist at the end of the light, so she accepted this, what they have is scapular or something of Our Lady of these perpetual help. She had that idea. She became a member of some society or that sort. And then the next confessor was Father Cormier, the Blessed and Dominican father. So he became a member, the third order of the Dominican congregation. So it just shows you how she wanted to use all that is the best in various spirituality. I don't know how she contained all of that in her, but somehow she did. And to give you an example, her retreat leaders, I found Capuchin, Resurrectionists, Jesuits, a lot of Jesuits, Franciscan, Benedictines, Dominicans, Redemptorists. In her writing, there are references to St. Ignatius of Loyola and his spiritual exercises, and I'm pretty sure that she made her retreat according to St. Ignatius' points and explanations. Writings of St. Alphonsus Liguori, the guide Introduction to the Devout Life by Francis de Sales, and the book In the Imitation of Christ by Thomas de Kempis. Her library, preserved in the archives in the General House, consists mainly of works of spirituality. There's, of course, the Bible, Polish and Latin Bible, like double-sided. And for example, among them, there are writings of Saint Teresa of Jesus, St. John of the Cross, St. Augustine, Catherine of Siena, works on Benedictine spirituality, and her contemporaries like Sebastian Pelcher, now saint, Cardinal Henry Edward Manning, Urson Newman, St. Teresa of the Child of Jesus, the Lycia, lived at the same time, so they couldn't meet, although there is one letter to Father Lechert when she mentioned this pious sister in France, that something in connection with the smell of roses. I don't remember exactly, but she mentioned her, so she heard about her. Among the various spiritualities, we have to think about Resurrection Spirituality School. They have their own school, their own kind of spirituality when they have certain points that are important. And why this is important? Because Father Lechert was under the influence of Father Semenenko, and he was a resurrectionist when he became her confessor. So he naturally used that spirituality. And there are, when I worked on those, I really saw that there are a lot of expressions that are typically used in that spirituality school in their writings. So really, we have to consider that. Apart from that, Father Piotr Semenenko, before Father Lechert, was his confessor. There are two periods of time when she went to confession to him. There's Father Leander wasn't there. Father Lechert was not yet. So she was looked for various confessors. And one of them was Piotr Semenenko, to a certain point. The Resurrectionist Fathers wanted to found a female branch of their congregation, Resurrectionist Sisters. And he wanted very much Mother Frances Siedliska then to be the founder, to be the first one. He really saw her as the first one. So she was invited to some kind of a retreat, but there were two other women considering to be, and then she knew it's not for her. It's not for her. And then there's this beautiful letter that she writes to Father Semenenko saying, I love you dearly, and I'm very grateful to you, but this is not the way for me. And so that's why resurrections fathers are very important in that story. Yeah, I'm looking at time. I think it's some. The question was what was different in 19th century. We all know, some of us, probably nearly all of us who are here, remember a different approach to spirituality and the struggle between nature and grace. The early Christian idea, when you read the fathers of the church, there's always this idea of grace building on the basis of the nature. But then during the centuries, something happened. That in 19th century was a time, I think it has started from 17th century till the end of 19th century, that really there was this idea that to live spiritual life, you have to renounce everything that comes from the world, and you renounce everything that comes from your body, and you need to live only the spiritual life. And in some way, that influenced the spirituality. Of course, the extreme versions were called quietism or the other, and they were not accepted. They were never accepted by the church, the extremities. But somehow, this idea entered also into the spirituality. So you have to be also aware of that the way it was perceived in 19th century was different, and Mother Founders was the child of her times, like we are the child of our times. When now Pope as Cardinal Wojtyła, later Pope John Paul II, he wrote a lot about it, that spirituality should incorporate the whole person. Everything was there. Okay, you cannot be spiritual on a spiritual level. Your body has to be also involved. Okay, this holistic approach came later, and in Mother Founders' times they were seen as two opposites. And we also know that in modern times we have the exaggerations in other directions. Okay, that we really honor our body too much. And we, nature is more important than spiritual things. But but in her time it was like that. This is a very important aspect, the role of Rome and Pope in the 19th century. We all know that Mother Foundress supported the Pope, and she asked us to always support the Church, to pray for the Pope, etc. And why? Because when she traveled to Rome, remember what happened? The Church state was abolished. Okay, she first traveled in 1873, so it was a pretty new thing. It ceased to exist, and there was this independence movement, unification movement in Italy before the Italy were separate principalities, and they wanted unification to become one country. And it seems to be a nice idea. At the beginning, Pope Pius IX supported it because it's just right. But then when he realized that there are some anti-Christian roots of this movement, and there are like Rotary clubs involved, and sort of masonry, he spoke against it. And that's why the society in Italy were really divided. And there were a lot of people against Pope because they didn't support unification. But he didn't support unification for this very reason, that it was not Christian. There were no Christian ideas behind it. And as a result, the church state was abolished. The church state, meaning that the church had a lot of property. Now the Vatican is the tiniest country, tiniest country in the world, and then it was quite an influential country. Okay, it had a lot of territories, so you have to remember that. So it was a very hostile atmosphere around the church, around the Pope especially. So in protest, Pius IX declared himself a prisoner of the Vatican, and liberal currents hostile to the church increased. So we all know that Pope lives in St. Peter's in Vatican. No, it's since 19th century. It was a papal church, yes, there was a palace papal church, but popes lived in Lateran, in St. John's Basilica in Lateran. So it's just since then that popes live in the Vatican. Successive popes did not leave their Roman residence while in office. Also Leo XIII, who was the next pope during Mother Foundress's lifetime. So, and it seems that the church is really in a tragic situation. When I have to finish, but I want to finish the sentence. When Pius IX died, and he was buried in Campo Verano in a church, exactly where our sisters are buried, in Mother Foundress' first grave was. There was so strong movement that the people were trying to push his body into the river. And it was common that people would say, okay, this is the last pope. There'll be no popes from that moment on. So it was a very serious situation. And that's, and it's interesting that crises bring some kind of a renewal, because at that point, there were a lot of people starting to support Pope and saying, no, Pope is important. And then we have this dogma of infallibility of the Pope. That's Leo XIII. It just, as a result, it strengthened the papacy. And also, there was a spiritual renewal of the priest, because before, the church was too involved in political matters, and especially the hierarchy, sorry, thank you, was very much, part of the political planning. Okay, they were not pious people because they didn't become cardinals because they were good people. They became cardinals because they belonged to certain circles or families or something. So, and that was a good result because the church was free, no politics. And the third was the formation of priests. And the very important center for priest formation was France and Paris, and that's where Father Lehert was for some time. And we know that it is the seminary of Saint Sulpice, I don't know what it's in English, Sulpicius or something. And they were played a leading role in priest formation, and Father Lehert participated in that formation. So it's well formed also from spiritual point of view. Okay. Let's stop here. We'll continue tomorrow. Thank you.